First of all, we'd like to thank you all for coming here today. We are from the Women's Leadership Project. My name is Bracelin, and I'm student coordinator this year. This is our advisor, my go-to, Dr. Christie Brungardt. So at the beginning of this, I would like to extend a big thank you to Patty. All of the information, almost all of it, came from her, and she really helped us through this whole process and looking through our old presentation. So just a big thank you to Patty. We're going to get started off. In front of you, there is a quiz, and we're just going to kind of test your knowledge, take a couple minutes to go through that and see what you know about Fort Hays State women from the past and present.
Is this at Fort Hays, number one?
Everything here is just
Yes,
Fort Hays.
yes,
Yeah.
all about Fort Hays.
What buildings? I don't know.
Oh, sure.
I don't know that. You even turned your paper over so it would have it.
Maybe.
Usually I'm pretty nervous because of evaluation. I wasn't suspecting you cheating. Well, that was my whole
All right, we'll go ahead and just jump into our first question. So what sport was the first to have a women's team? Is there any ideas or, yeah, just kind of. Softball? Softball? No.
Tennis?
Synchronized swimming.
It was indeed basketball in 1902. Some kind of fun facts about women's sports in our history is that we did have women teams up to the late 1930s, but they were more comparable to what our intramurals are today. It wasn't until 1970 that they started intercollegiate play with volleyball. And in 1971 to 1972, there was intercollegiate play in volleyball, basketball, and softball. And in the next few years, we added track, tennis, and gymnastics.
I might add one thing to that. Does anybody know when Title IX passed?
74?
72. Oh, might that be why? In 71, 72, it's like the writing was on the wall. We're going to have to let those darn women play sports.
And then just kind of another fun fact about sports in our history, it was in the years 1990 and 91 that the ladies basketball season won the championship with the record of 34-2. They dominated. Question number 2, was the first student to pay tuition at FHSU a male or female? Any ideas there?
We're talking about women, so I guess female.
That is a good guess, and it was a female. That was Jenny Ward.
I believe Patty even found the check.
Yeah.
I mean, she knows how to find things.
Yes. Number 3, how many buildings on campus are named after women?
2?
At least 3. There's probably 4.
Our picture gives it away a little bit here. There was 4. Any ideas on what those buildings are, or which buildings?
Agnew,
Yep. Agnew, yep. And the last one
Maud McMinus.
is McMidas, yes. So Custer Hall was named after Elizabeth Custer, the wife of General George Armstrong Custer, and it served as the first women's on-campus resident hall and housed 88 residents when it was put up. Stroop Hall is named in honor of Leora B. Stroop, the nursing program's founder. McMidas is named in honor of Professor Maud M. McMidas, who served as the Director of Secondary Teacher Training and the Director of Student Teaching. And at the time that it was put up, kind of a cool fun fact, the building increased the campus housing by half. It's kind of a big number. And then Agnew was named after Dean Elizabeth Agnew, a former domestic economy instructor here.
Which I wondered what that means.
Yeah.
Domestic economy,
I think it's probably home economic.
Yeah, I was
home
gonna
ec,
say home ec.
yeah.
that kind of stuff. I thought that's a strange term.
Question number 4, in what year was the first African American female student elected homecoming queen?
60s, 80s.
Any more guesses? It was in 1970, and this is a picture of her, Stella Howard. Question 5, the first female vice president at FHSU started in what year? Yes.
Knew that one.
Yep. Dr. Mason in 2008. And then our last question, in what year did the first female president of FHSU start her career?
2014.
Yep, Dr. Martin in 2014.
Did everybody know that, when, I'm gonna back up a slide, that when Dr. Mason came in 2008, she had no idea that there had never been another female vice president. She learned it at new faculty or whatever orientation. That's when she first learned that there had never been.
What? I got that one wrong. I will confess, because I thought Dorothy Knoll was the vice president. Was she not?
I don't know this. I don't know the answer to that. Not that we could find
Not a
anyway.
vice president.
Not a vice president?
I don't know if she would have been vice president at her time. They may have been a similar title.
I don't know.
She was student affairs,
I think
so
a director. She's probably a director. I don't think she was or an assistant dean.
maybe she was an assistant vice president of student affairs. Because when I came, she was here.
The only thing I know for sure is Dr. Mason has come in and spoken a couple times in my women in leadership class. And she said that when she was, all the new people were sitting around at orientation, Dr. Hammond said something about the first time we've ever had a female vice president. And she said she was just shocked. She said, I couldn't even hardly focus then after that because I was shocked to learn that. And so, I want to be sure that, I know some people would know this, but in relation, can you back up to that
Yep.
last slide? So in 2008, we get our first female vice president since the university was created in 1902. So it took from 1902 to 2008 to get our first female vice president. Wow, that's why the Women's Leadership Project thinks these kinds of things are important for people to know.
So moving forward, we're going to dig into our history a little more and talk about some of the women of our past here at Fort Hays. So the first woman we are talking about is Catherine O'Laughlin McCarthy. She was a graduate of Fort Hays Normal School in 1917. She was the first Kansas woman and first woman lawyer to serve in Congress in 1933. And O'Laughlin Elementary School, which is just right down the road, is actually named after her. It opened its doors at the beginning of the 1990 school year, and they named it after her because she devoted her career to children, women, the poor, and minorities, and especially encouraged education. The next woman we'll talk about is Susan Calvert. She graduated from Fort Hays in 1941. And in 1942, she was one of 25 women appointed by the U.S. Navy to attend naval school to be a naval instructor. And that was a really big deal at the time, of course. The next is Elizabeth Jane Agnew. She was born July 25th, 1871 in Princeton, Kansas. And then she came to Fort Hays and she went to Kansas State University and received her bachelor's degree in home economics. And then she came here to Fort Hays in June of 1910 and spoke and convinced everyone that they needed a home economics department here. So she started that and was the head and organized that first home economics department here at Fort Hays. She was also the first dean of women, and served as dean until her retirement in 1943. And she, like we said, was one of the first women to have a building named after her here at Fort Hays. The next one is Geneva Herndon. She was the founder of the Communication Disorder Program at Fort Hays State. She convinced the administration that there was a need for speech-language pathology to prepare students to provide students or services to students and children and adults with communicative disabilities. She majored in English and home economics at Fort Hays State, and then she went on to teach the first course in speech pathology at Fort Hays State in 1950. And she established a scholarship fund after her, and now it goes to women majoring in speech pathology or towards a profession she loves, and it provides living memorial to women who served Fort Hays State and her professional association as well. The next woman is Clara Malloy, and you might recognize that last name from the music and arts building over there. She and her husband founded the music department here at Fort Hays State. She chaired the music department and also tutored several students. Over 54 years, she instructed violin students and also vocal music. And she was associated with Fort Hays for more than 40 years. Really long time.
Yeah.
Here are some of our first ladies, or all of our first ladies at FHSU in the time that they served. Kind of some cool pictures and history of them.
I'm gonna say, Mrs. Lewis, after her husband passed away, they started the Lewis Field Project,
Oh, yeah.
and she was the mother of the boys that lived there.
Oh, very cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Cool. So now moving forward, we'll talk about some of the women of our present here at Fort Hays. So of course, starting off, we have our president, Dr. Tiffany Mason. She is a native of Palmer, Massachusetts. Then went on to receive her Bachelor's of Arts from Transylvania University, majoring in sociology, anthropology. In 1984, Mason completed her master's degree at Eastern Illinois University, as well as her education doctorate from the College of William and Mary in 1992. And then she kind of went on, and you can see all of kind of her career and all the positions that she filled, all the way up until the point when she was inaugurated as our president here at Fort Hays State.
Where's this one? It should be in North Dakota. Am I missing that? Yeah,
I
I'm missing
think,
that.
yeah,
Yeah, there should be another school in there. Sorry about that. Where she came here from?
yes, before moving here.
Was it?
It's
was
North
it
Dakota.
Brown?
North Dakota. Something North Dakota.
Oh,
but
she was at Valley City.
Valley City.
Oh, Valley City.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, sorry about that. We missed that.
Then moving on, we have Dr. Martin. And here we have kind of the years that we talked about with Dr. Mason as well, becoming our first vice president, was how many years it took before we had our first female president here. That's kind of cool and kind of crazy to think about. Here lists all of the numerous awards she received through her career so far. She had a bachelor's degree in psychology and political science from Duke University, a Master of Business Administration degree from the University of Richmond, a doctorate with an emphasis in strategic management and leadership from Virginia Commonwealth University, and she served here, of course, as our president.
You want me to talk about
Yes,
this?
I would
Okay.
love that.
Did any of you know Kristin Target when she was a student here on campus? I don't remember the exact, let's see, she got her master's from here in 2012, so it must have been about 2010. I was teaching a class online in the summer, and there was this young woman, or this woman, she would love that I said young woman, we're about the same age, But there was this woman in my online intro class from Maine, and she was just amazing. She was just an amazing student. And through the course of, it might have been a regular semester, because through the course of the whole semester, I learned that she had lived in Hayes when she was younger. I learned she had some connections to Fort Hays State. But it wasn't until she graduated with her undergrad and called one day and said, I think I'm going to get my master's. Would you write a letter for me? And I said, absolutely, I would do that. And she not only decided to get her master's, she moved here and lived here from Maine for 2 years when she was getting her master's degree and was a graduate assistant in our department. So that was really cool. And through that process, we all learned a lot more about her family. Well, it ends up that her grandmother, which I love, ran the union. She was in charge of the Memorial Union in 1920. I just am shocked still at that. But and one thing that we didn't get on, we did go ahead and add that. Her grandfather managed, actually she told me later, she sent me another text, and her grandfather started our on-campus print shop. And so he started the print shop and then ran the print shop, and she was a little girl when all that was going on. So her memories of Fort Hays State were, this grand place that everything was perfect. When she was a little girl, she just absolutely loved it here. So she wanted to come back here and get that experience as an adult. So after her kids were raised and she decided to finish her undergrad and then get her master's, here is where she did it. So I just think that was so cool. And the rest of that story is she then went on and got a PhD. And she now is teaching leadership studies at the University of Arkansas, Fort Smith. So there's a long story about Kristin Target, but it was fun for me to get to meet her in an intro class. And then actually, as Kurt and I were coming back from a vacation in January, we stopped at Fort Smith and had dinner with her. So it was cool. I just love all those kinds of connections. But she has great memories of Fort Hays State University.
Moving forward, and I'll let Christie talk a little bit more about this one, we start talking about our female department chairs and how that's changed over the years.
So some of you, I know, would remember back several years ago, we started an AAUW program here on campus. And when we first started that, it was in 2000, prior to that, in 2005, when did we decide this one is?
That one
Is
is,
it 2005?
and there was 7, sorry. Yes, at the time.
There were 7 there, okay. These are the 4 they got in the picture. And of course, 2 of them are no longer here, but Carol and Cheryl are. So I think that's pretty cool. But neither of them are the department chairs now. So, it's changing all the time. I think maybe you can only do that for so long, it seems like. And then you're like, nope. But I thought that was cool. This article actually came out in the Hays Daily News, so they did this story on them. I thought that was really cool that they were even thinking about how many female department chairs are there. At that time, I believe there were 26 departments. I'm not positive, but I know there weren't quite as many as there are today. You can read about the statistics about what female faculty earned, about 10% less than males, and about 19%, is it 19% correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
so 19% of all department chairs were female.
Is that Fort Hays or is that nationwide?
No, that's here. That's just here.
Yep. And in that article, it talks about how Fort Hays, though, was like leading the pack in having those numbers, and that most other universities were only at like 80% of what their male counterparts made. So kind of cool to think that we were even recognized as a university for being above those statistics.
So there were 7 then. So that's
Yes.
the good news. We're fixing to show you the bad news.
Yes.
Let's see, in 2011, female faculty earned about 91%. And at that time, it was 2011, there were 10. So we'd gone from 7 up to 10. So that was a good thing.
And then we still have good growth through 2016. We got up to 12, I think is what it was, or 11 female department chairs. And that was like 36% representation throughout the departments. And now we kind of hit some bad news of where we're at now with department chairs. We're down to 9 between 30 departments. So that's about 30%, but still pretty cool that we're even that high. These are all
Have you all done or thought about doing any look at earnings for female department chairs versus male department chairs or any of that?
When we were doing AAEW still, and we still had that going, I did a lot of that looking, and it was kind of depressing news. I can't remember the numbers, you know. or
I know
anything else.
nationally it's like 74% or something like that.
I know that across all sectors, we're at about 81%. We've come up, since I started really studying these things in about 2002, we have come up from about 77 cents on the dollar to now we're about 81 cents on the dollar across all sectors. And so that part, I do know the numbers. I do know that when I first started studying these issues in about 2002, at that time of the Fortune 500 company, how many would you suppose out of 500 companies at that time in 2002, how many do you think out of 500 were female CEOs?
2.
3.
Two, exactly correct. Anybody know what there is today?
15.
No, we've gotten a little better. We've gotten a little better. I actually didn't look that up. I should have looked that up today. But every fall, when I taught my women in leadership class, I would look that up. This past fall, we were at 21. So we've come from 2 to 21, which sounds like awesome. Oh, but wait, that's 21 out of 500. So it's still pretty sad. We still have quite a ways to go.
Ending now, of course, we'd love to thank Patty again. We couldn't have done this presentation without her and all of her research for us and working with me. And also, if there's any questions or other discussion points, we'd love to chat.
Yeah, because we're giving it like...
Yeah, sorry, we kind of sped through it and I was talking fast.
When this happens in class, I never see anyone cry. They have to leave early. So maybe you won't care.
Thanks to Google, Dorothy Knoll was an assistant vice president, but she was not a vice president.
And as of 2018, there were 25.
25?
Dorothy Knoll with KU.
But one of
I
them, the
didn't even
Pepsi one
know
just
her
stepped
before this
down,
went
and
out.
I don't know,
Here.
probably the best place to go find that would be catalyst.org, but it's probably close. Yeah, 25 would be the most we've ever had, for sure. Anything else? Brittany, did you have anything?
Well, I was just gonna say, I thought that was interesting looking at the current chairs and thinking like some of those are interims, and then also thinking about, even though we have a female president, looking at our deans and VPs now and how even at that level there's still some disparity.
Oh, maybe I should talk about this since we're being
Go
so-
ahead.
But I will.
You can tell Andy to turn off the camera.
What are they gonna do, fire me? Hang out 3 months left. So I was asked several years ago to serve, if I would be interested in serving on the Foundation Board of Trustees. And when I went to my first meeting, there were a whole bunch of people there and like 4 women. And I said, I would be interested in doing that, but I'm gonna come in with one agenda item. And that's what I'm gonna work on. And there are more women today. There are more minorities on our foundation trustees board today, and I think that's awesome. Because if you look, I haven't done this research for the last 3 or 4 years, but several years ago, the last time I looked, we were, and some of you might know this, but this campus was 58% female. Well, if we've got 58% female going to school on our campus, we should have 58% representation in all these places, and we don't. And so we're quite a ways behind. We're better than we've ever been. Well, you know, give or take a department chair or 2. But for the most part, we're better than we've ever been, and we still have a ton of work to do. So,
The toss-up would be the jump that they made from chair to dean. If there's women dean, then there would have been, or Dr. Jen jumping up to dean in the graduate school, leaving her position as chair.
yeah, that's true. That is true.
Those kind of toss-ups are great.
Tell us.
Interim dean in business.
That's true. Yeah, that is true.
Were you all able to find out, or maybe you didn't look, who was the first female academic dean at Fort Hays State, as opposed to dean of women? And I'm not trying to denigrate that, but I'm
Right.
just saying, who was, did you all find out?
We
first?
didn't look, do you know? I
What was the
don't.
question?
Well, who was the first female academic dean at Fort Hays? Because I know when I came in 1990, there was one.
Uh-huh.
And that was Dr. Mary Hoyt in the College of Education, and I don't know if she was the first or not.
And then after that was
I don't
Debbie
think so.
Mercer.
I'd have to look at Dr. Forsythe's book and find that out.
I don't have a clue.
I
Yeah, we
was
should've
thinking there
looked
were
at that, but I don't know.
some earlier people that had that higher classification in their job, but I can't think of who they are right now.
Dean and women, but yeah, that wouldn't be academic.
Not academic. I just don't know.
What about, wasn't nursing a college on its own for a while?
I don't, it
I
wasn't,
think so.
it wasn't after I got here, but my memory only goes back to 1990, so.
I'll see what Google says.
See what Google says, Lynn.
I can't correlate this, but I will say I found it interesting. I worked here at Fort Hays 1988 to 1990. At that time, librarians were tenure track faculty. Came back in 2014 to find librarians were no longer faculty. And we are the only school that, in the KBOR group that has that arrangement.
I didn't know that.
We are now we are the only one that are non-tenure track now, so we have changed that a little bit. And this was the only school in the KBORs that did not have a dean as the lead for the library. So we've had a very unusual history, and I can't help but tie that to, in my mind, the fact that this is a female-based organization. Now, of course, we have men working, but, you know, we're predominantly female, and I think it speaks to culture.
Yeah, that is very interesting. I had no idea about that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that'd be interesting to look. We should add that to this presentation.
I
to do
know,
it
that's what I
again.
was thinking, yeah.
Yeah.
We do have Deb here as a woman dean that we forgot about.
Yeah.
And the first one, and it's always, is she an academic dean or not? I think, well, yeah.
That is so strange.
Yeah.
I've never.
Yeah.
Was there anyone this or you can say who the first female department chair
I don't know who that, I don't know who that would have been. Anybody know
What was
that?
that question?
She asked, does anybody know who the first female chair or dean would have been? I don't know who that would have been.
Was Jean Topher, who Topher Land was named for, was she a dean?
I don't know. But Leslie's got her phone.
I only ask because if you all get Tiger Daily, I've been doing posts every day for Women's History Month, like I did last month for Black History Month. And so I'm always looking for something interesting to fill in the gaps on the days that I don't already have days on.
I want to
Does
say
everybody
that.
know Michelle? Do all of you know
Yeah,
Michelle?
those have been so, I've actually really enjoyed reading those.
Why don't, as few of us as there are, why don't we do this, just so everybody for sure knows everybody? And it just dawned on me, they might, some of them don't, and I see some of them do not know you.
Wow.
Okay, let me just stand up there. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Michelle Chance. I am full-time staff, started back in September in Tilt. I'm the Faculty Development Training Specialist. I've also been a part-time adjunct faculty of psychology for 4 years, brought in under the awesome Jennifer Bonjaraki. And I am excited that I'm able to work with these groups and kind of really expand on my knowledge base as well as, you know, invest in my passions. Because right now I'm finishing up my PhD studies in leadership, and my studies are actually on higher education and specifically the disparity of women of color in executive leadership. And so I'm exploring women of color that serve as college presidents and chancellors. So this is just right up my alley, trying to find, you know, anything interesting about women. So
Here is your best friend, right here.
yes.
Thank you. Michelle, why don't, go ahead, and let's just everybody, so that Michelle knows who we are too.
Do I have to stand up?
No, you don't have to
Okay.
stand
My name is Lynn Ann Huntington. I started at Fort Hays State in 1990 and retired in 2016 as the Director of Journalism. For the first 13 years that I was here, I advised the University Leader student newspaper. For the last 5 years I was here, I was the I know many of you younger gals don't quite know what those are, but back in the day, newspapers were our major source of community news. And when I started, week after I graduated with a BA, I started working for the largest news organization in my home state of Oklahoma. And they told me, when I went in for an interview, they told me, well, I wanted a full-time job on what's called the universal news desk. And the universal news desk on a newspaper put the paper together, took all of the information, all the pictures, all the stories, and put the paper together, decided what stories were going where, how much room they would get, what pictures would run, kind of the nerve central of a newspaper. And I was told, well, we've never had a full-time woman on the news desk before. And I said, well, now's a good time to start, because women make up 51% of your readership. It would be nice to have at least one representative on the universal news desk who could represent those interests. Now, they did have women, but they were part-time, because they were 39 and a half hours part-time. That meant no benefits. And they said, and I asked why, and they said, well, you know, on the universal news desk, you see a lot, and you read a lot of graphic material. And we want to protect women from that. And I said, you know, I think I can take that extra half hour a week and it won't bother me any. So they hired me on a probationary status, which I actually suggested to them. I said, let's do this for 6 months, and if I work out great, and if I don't, I will just fade off, right off into the sunset, and you won't have to worry about it. And I was there for 6 years before I went back and got my master's and decided to teach on the university level. The glass ceiling was very, very low at that newspaper, and I'm hopeful at some point that it got a little higher.
There's an excellent book about similar situation at Newsweek called Good Girls Revolt, that if you have not read that, it makes for very interesting reading about this exact thing, about this exact industry. The Post, if you've not seen that movie, is another one, a very similar kind of conversation in that, and based on absolute true story of Katharine Graham's life. So that, for anyone who's taking notes, I can see young women like, I've never heard of these things before. That's why you have to have books. But those are all good, great resources. How about back here that I don't even know your name to ask you to introduce yourself?
I'm Jenna. I'm just a student here. I'm a freshman. I just came to watch.
Thank you. We're glad that you're here. Don't say just a student. None of us would be here if it weren't for
Right,
students.
you're the reason we're here.
Yeah, you hold the power, you just don't know it. Great. Well, thank you for coming. We appreciate it.
I'm Patty Nicola. My association with Fort Hays State goes way back. I can remember probably the first time was when I was 9 or 10 years old. And you talked about Dr. Geneva Herndon on here. I remember her because my mom brought me over here for a speech lesson. And that was when the speech department was in the top floor of Malloy Hall.
Oh.
So I do remember her. So, and my mom brought me over here for a few years for speech lessons, and my dad was very involved with the Hays Symphony Orchestra. So by the time it came for me to decide where to go to school, I chose Fort Hays State and came here in '77. I got a job at Forsyth Library in '78, working as a student. And right when I was getting ready to graduate, there was a full-time opening in the library, and I applied for it. And I've been here. This is my 38th year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're just like Kurt. You came here and you just never left. That's how he's done too. He's been here 33 years.
I'm Brittany Squire, and I'm the outreach specialist here at Forsyth Safe Library pretty recently. I just started in the library in December, but I've actually been on the Fort Hays campus since 2014. I was previously working in student involvement in the student affairs sector of the university. So I'm just happy to be here and excited to learn more about this. I have a master's in the Department of Leadership, and so I have the utmost respect for that department and specifically the women in that department. Thinking of like administration, a good friend and mentor of mine was one of those few female administrators, Dr. Keegan Nichols, who is now a VP at another institution. And so she's always been really inspiring for me as a young professional.
And 2,000 more, 2,000 more. She's inspired many people.
I'm Leslie Page. I'm the director of the Office of Scholarship and Sponsored Projects here at Fort Hays. And I worked in the corporate world in Cleveland, Ohio before we moved here, where it was standard practice to ask women of childbearing age what kind of birth control you were using, because corporate world did not want to invest in us if we were going to go out and start having babies. We were also told what to wear in the corporate world, so it was quite interesting. So I came here in 1978. I got 2 graduate degrees here at Fort Hays in school psychology. I worked as a school psychologist in the school districts in this region for about 20-some years before I came back to Fort Hays State as an employee. Just incidentally, next year I'm going to be leaving university for a year because I will be serving as president of the National Association of School Psychologists. And then I'll come back and I'll be a nobody again. So,
And it'll probably feel good.
I've been in my 2 professions, my previous profession as a school psychologist, long enough to see it shift from being mainly men to mainly women. So that's been a very interesting demographic shift. And so we'll see what happens with the future.
Great.
I'm Deb Ludwig. I came in 2014 as the dean of the library, but in 1988 I was the catalog librarian, and it was a really exciting job because we put in the first, Karen Cole, who was the director of the library, and I worked and put in the first automated library system, so those systems that replaced the old card catalogs. And I will say we were also the people who wired this library for network access. So we got up in the ceiling, both of us on ladders, and we were throwing, at that time it was coax cable, so before Ethernet, we were throwing the coax cable and hooked up all the IBM terminals for this library. But I have 2 kind of interesting women's stories as well, you know, that I was thinking about as you all were talking. I was a KU student from 1972 to 1976, and I got real tired of waitressing. I worked at Henry's Hamburgers, and so I found a Vickers station that was all female run, and this was like 73 probably. That was a really unusual thing, and she would only hire women. Well, a man from Hillcrest Mobile came through and said, "We're kind of thinking we might want to hire our first girl to work at the station. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Well, I might be." He said, "Now, the guys all make $1.75, but we'd probably pay you $1.50. And then I said, "Well, then I'm not interested." But I did go to, they paid me the same as the guys, and I learned how to fix tires, and at that time you had to fill radiators and put cars on lifts and all that kind of stuff, so I learned how to do that, and I've always been kind of a car and motorcycle junkie. I own a couple of motorcycles as well. But my second story is I was the public library director in Alamosa, Colorado, and I was trying to get better wages for the women who worked in the public library there, and the city manager at that time said to me, "Well, I'm telling you, Deb, women with a college degree are a dime a dozen in this town," because it was where Adams State College was at that time. So we have made tremendous growth in this, and we complain and we see the problems and how far we still have to go, but we've made tremendous strides in the last 40, 50 years.
I am trying to remember another book. Cannot remember the name of it. Gail Collins is the author, and it is really the history of all this in a story per chapter. And she's done 2 volumes, and one of them is much earlier, but this book that I'm trying to remember the name of it is from like the 60s or 70s to present when she wrote it, which was a few years ago. And anyone who is interested in learning more about this, for you young folks that did not live through these times, that's a great book for you to learn so much from. And she herself, I should know, has quite a story. She was the first female editor of the editorial page of the New York Times. And so she broke some glass with that, with getting that position. And I would give anything if I could think of it. Oh, When Everything Changed. There it is. When Everything Changed, the amazing journey of American women from 1960 to the present. You will learn so much. And though some of the stories seem absolutely unbelievable, I'll vouch for her. They're true. They're true. I think thanks all for sharing your stories. That's great. It makes it much more fun that way. And we didn't come prepared with lots and lots of material, so that's really all we have. Thank you for being here. And Patty knows about all these things if anybody is curious about any of this stuff we had in your test.